Welcome to the Duckpin Podcast with your host, Brian Griffiths. And now, here's Brian.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another brand new episode of the Duckpin Podcast. I am your host, Brian Griffiths. Joining me on this week's episode of the show, Tim Cooke. He's the director of Mid Atlantic Wiffleball. He's also one of the organizers of the upcoming United Wiffleball National Championship tournament coming up in York, PA at the end of this month. Don't you dare miss this one. Stick with us on the Duckpin Podcast. Our guest on this week's episode of the Duckpin Podcast is somebody well known in the wiffleball community, which is a community not many people actually know about. So we're going to get the opportunity to talk with him today. He's the director of Mid Atlantic Wiffle, Tim Cooke. Tim, thanks for joining us on the show tonight.
Hey, thanks for having me, Brian.
Yeah, appreciate you coming out. So obviously, like I said, people haven't heard a lot about wiffleball. Wiffleball is not a career. So let's just kind of what's your background of just like kind of what you do and like what your full-time gig is?
So my full-time gig is communications, a lot of public relations, community outreach stuff, which kind of fits in well with wiffleball being my hobby, that I'm able to take some of those skills and transfer them over. But yeah, we're not even in it. We're not even close to an area where I can make even a part-time living off of whiffs, at least in 2020.
So let's talk about that. Like I said, competitive wiffle ball is something that a lot of people aren't necessarily familiar with. I'll be honest, I'm playing in the tournament this year, and I didn't even know it existed until sometime during this pandemic. So tell a little bit about competitive wiffle ball and particularly fast pitch wiffle ball, which is something that I'm sure a lot of people aren't really familiar with.
Yeah. So ever since 1988, there has been a yearly national fast pitch championship somewhere in the country. In the late 80s and early 90s, it was up in Massachusetts. For many years, 2003 to 2009, it was down in Texas. And basically, it's getting every hardcore wiffle baller in one spot to play, one tournament over 2 days and, figure out who the best team is. This year's, the one we're running in October, it's an open. So anyone can enter with any roster. So especially since we, didn't have a full season and we, don't have qualifications, the team that wins this may not be the best overall team, but they certainly will be the best team of the 40 on Saturday, the 24th, and Sunday, the 25th.
And we'll talk a little bit more about the United Wiffle National Championship later on. But first, I want to talk about Mid Atlantic Wiffle, which is something you're a director of Mid Atlantic Wiffle, based in the York, PA area, not too far away from me here in Maryland. How did you get involved with Mid Atlantic Wiffle? Kind of what's your role as somebody who's the director of Mid Atlantic Wiffle entail?
So I started hosting tournaments when I was 16 back in 1998. I hosted half dozen tournaments from 98 to 2002. And then as we got better and better as a team, I had to pull back hosting tournaments because we were having to play in all the big ones. So we played as a team, the Stompers. That was my team from back then until 2004. Both of our pitchers still need Tommy John surgery. The Stompers health insurance plan does not cover Tommy John surgery. So how Mid Atlantic got started was back in 2016, a guy from York, Nick Shirey, whose fields we play at, he got in touch with me, and we had crossed paths maybe once or twice before. He told me just bought a house specifically so he could build this great wiffle ball field in the backyard. He said, you want to play a best of 5 exhibition? We're like, oh yeah, our 2 pitchers, since they hadn't thrown, since 2004, they'd be good for the day. Go up to York, play the best of 5, and, immediately hooked back in. So when we started Mid Atlantic in 2017, we literally started as a 4-team tournament, and grew one team at a time in 2017. And after 3.5 years, we had each of our events this year sold out, whether it was due to capacity or just, general, we can only take 18 teams to, run this tournament with the daylight that's left.
Yeah, that's awesome. Now there are a lot. I've done some research, between Twitter and YouTube and Facebook. There's a lot of wiffle ball teams, or leagues rather, in the country. Do you kind of have a sense, an estimate of how many leagues there are actually running out there in the country right now?
I mean, at least 50 plus. And I mean, we're not, you're not even seeing the guys, especially a lot of the Midwest and the South, where, they're just, they're local leagues, but we don't know them. They don't know us. And like, it's always funny when you meet a new team or a new group of folks who, oh yeah, we've been running this league for 10 years and, you just haven't clicked in the right word in Google to find them. And, they've got all their videos up and it's like, oh man, God, we should have got in touch with you. 2 or 3 years ago, we'd be, we need guys like you, at our tournaments.
That's awesome. Let's talk about United Wiffleball. You had mentioned previously that there have been national championship tournaments for a long time now. You and some of the other folks at Mid Atlantic are part of the United Wiffleball organization. I'm just going to go ahead and read the mission statement from the website here.
Sure.
United Wiffleball is a collection of individuals and organizations formed for the express purposes of continuing the fast-pitch national championship tradition, weaving that championship into the fabric of the greater wiffleball community, and encouraging year-round play. So you mentioned earlier, that there have been championship games and tournaments going on since 1988. And I know there was a lull in these national championship tournaments. So tell us a little bit about some of that historical nature of those old tournaments. Obviously, you said it's been since 1988, and the impetus to form United Wiffleball this year.
So from 88 to 92, the national championship was up in Boston, run by a guy named Rick Ferroli. He did everyone's dream by building Fenway in his backyard. As an Oriole fan today, I don't accept that as being the one field you should make. But as a kid and seeing the field, it looks pretty good. So he ran until 1992. There wasn't a national championship in 93, 94. In 1995 through 1997, a guy named Kevin Priceman out in Hamilton, Ohio, he ran the national championship. He was with the Parks and Rec department, and he got 4 permanent fields built. And because no one had laid a claim on the national title, he called his event the national championship, and people came. He got, I think, 24 to 32 teams each year from 95 to 97. 98 to 2000, there's a little bit of a lull. There were some really, really big tournaments, but there wasn't one that, was a culmination of the year end. So then 2001 to 2002, I was part of an 11-man committee that put together those 2 national championships. That morphed into Fast Plastic, which ran from 2003 to 2009. Then Golden Stick, who we're partnering with United Wiffle, they did the national championships from 2010 to 2015. And Fast Plastic came back for the last, from 17 to 19. And earlier this year, they disappeared. And we wanted to, continue this tradition and, have a really great year-end event. And it just so happened that, right as the pandemic hit, we started, meeting every Tuesday, and we're able to put together a tournament, in about 6 months, which in terms of planning time, that's fast. If we had a full year, I can only imagine what we would have done.
Yeah, I mean, that is a very quick turnaround, and we'll talk a little bit about, the teams and kind of where they're coming from here in a second. Obviously, as you mentioned earlier, the first ever United Wiffleball National Championship is coming up October 24th and 25th in York, PA. The obvious answer as to why York is it's because you're from York. What advantages does York bring other than it's right in your backyard? It makes it a little easier to help organize.
Good question. So the York Revolution, which is an independent team, they play in the same league as like the New York Ducks, I think, and there's a bunch of other teams. Their groundskeeper came to us last September, and they're always looking for off-season business to help foot the bills for when baseball's not being played. So they came to us, and we were like, "Oh, that's awesome! We'd love to run an event." So initially, it was just going to be an MAW event. Maybe not even part of the regular season, just end of the year kind of fun get together. But once the pandemic hit and we realized that New York, Boston, we weren't going to be able to get permits and all of that stuff, the one thing we had was the stadium. And even though they're an independent league team, the stadium, both in the grandstands but also on the field, is AAA quality. Like I've been to Bowie a bunch of times, and I think their infield grass is as good, if not better, than Bowie. And I know the Bay Sox get a ton of love for their infield. So it just made sense. We had the venue, and I think the stadium provides a unique opportunity that hasn't been done in the 30-plus years of having a national championship.
Yeah, I mean, not many people get to step on the field of a professional stadium. Like I said, I've had the opportunity, to like take BP in Bowie and to take BP at Camden Yards and stuff like that, and which is awesome. I mean, which is, don't get me wrong, nothing's going to top taking BP at Camden Yards with my name on the back of an Orioles jersey. That is the top,
no doubt.
But but just like I said, having an opportunity to play real competitive games on a professional ball field, especially one, because the Atlantic League, very high quality play, particularly for a lot of the newer ballparks in York, Lancaster, down here in Southern Maryland. So it's just a really cool opportunity. There are 40 teams participating from 26 states, and there are from perennial powers, teams that have been playing wiffle ball for a long time, to teams like me who saw about, my team, Old Line Wiffle, which just saw the tournament, and I texted a bunch of my idiot friends and said, "Hey, let's play competitive wiffle ball." And the tournament was sold out before the early registration period closed. Did that response exceed your expectations, or did you think that was that something that you expected?
Oh, I mean, it exceeded big time. Wiffle ballers in general are usually, last minute to sign up for stuff. We had 10 teams signed up in the first week. If you told us on June 1st that, we'd have 40 teams by midnight on July 31st, I would have made $1,000, $2,000 bet with you. Would have lost, but yeah, it's far exceeded it to the point that, it's going to be a great event, but 40 teams, is going to make things, just go a little bit slower on the field, at least day one. But we think that everything else we're offering in between games will be enough to keep people and then get to that, real championship Sunday.
Let's talk about the dimensions a little bit, because I mean, what you guys are doing is you're going to be able to fit 8 fields into the ballpark footprint there in York, and I don't think people necessarily understand the kind of the shrunken dimensions of what we're talking about when we're talking about competitive fast pitch wiffle ball. So just kind of lay out a little bit like what sizes the fields are going to be, and here's a fun question: are the different fields going to be uniform, or are there going to be unique dimensions for all the fields?
So I'll answer the second question first. There will be unique fields. The Revs have a left field wall that's actually higher by like 1.5 feet than Fenway's Green Monster. And one of the fields trickles onto that. It won't be 8 cookie cutter, fields. There'll be unique characteristics to each of them. Generally, we still, make the fields 90 degrees, usually 85, 90 feet down each line, 100 to 110 dead center. We have an infield line at 50 feet that serves as your singles line. If you hit it and get it past that line without a fielder picking it up, it's a single. Ball hits off the wall, that's a double, or rolls to the wall, that's a double. Off the wall is triple, home run. We have sac flies. You can turn double plays. Really the best way to, explain the game is it's hit, pitch, field. No running, which, we found has been a help in like recruiting softball players who still want that, who still have that baseball itch, but they, are done with softball and they're like, oh, I can just go hit and field. That's great. So, those are the general dimensions of the field. Pitcher's mound's 45 to the plate, 48 feet to the backstop. It's the dimensions are usually in that area. And, in my 20 plus years, those are the dimensions where, you can, if you can show whether you're a home run hitter or you're, just a solid singles guy.
Yeah, that's awesome. As a guy who's learning how to pitch, and who's going to do my best Jesse Orozco left-handed junk ball impression. I want the one with the high wall in left field for all those right-handed hitters. Let's talk a little bit about the mechanics. You've got 40 teams, and obviously you got to get from 40 to 1. A lot of teams that have 40, like the World Cup, like soccer's World Cup, for example. There's pool play, and you kind of whittle down to a knockout round tournament. What's the mechanics of that going to look like? How are we going to get from 40 to 1?
So by the time this podcast comes out, we'll have announced the full format. But, basically you're going to play in 3 games early on in the day. And simply put, you go 3-0 or 2-1, you're through to the round of 24. Any team that's got a lesser record at 1-2 or 0-2 are going to have to fight their way through a couple of more games, because our whole philosophy is, if you come out of the gate 0-2 or, even 1-2, even if it's against 2 good teams on that day, we think that you need to do a little bit more. So Saturday will be getting all of our teams either to the final 24 or, or being eliminated from the tournament.
Okay, well, that's pretty awesome, and it guarantees us a certain number of games. Everybody is going to get the opportunity to play, which is kind of awesome. You mentioned that this year the tournament is an open. I have to think, just based on the success, that you're already looking at 2021. I know when I run a successful event, I'm already starting to think about the next event before I've even gotten through this event. Have you and the committee kind of given any thought as to what that's going to look like insofar as number of teams, qualification, whether or not at some point down the road you're going to add a regional aspect to this? Kind of what's the future look like in your kind of ultimate view of this?
Well, so in a world where the pandemic, slows down and we kind of get back to normal, I think the long-term vision is back to what we did in the early 2000s. There's different regional tournaments where they run 3 or 4 tournaments a year. You play in those, you earn points, you have a playoff in your region, and all of the cash prize through the regular tournaments goes to that winner, and they use the money to get to wherever the national championship is. That sort of thing is probably at least 5 years away. Next year, we will have qualifications just so that we can seed teams that play throughout the year. Because, we don't want to see we don't want a 3-0 team to necessarily have to play a 1-2 team and be eliminated in that game off of bad random luck. So we have thought forward for what 2021 is going to be, but right now it's all about the 24th and the 25th.
So let's talk about that for a second. You actually kind of pinged my interest about it in a question for this year and how seeding is going to work. You said you're looking at seeding next year. Is there a way that you're going to be able to seed teams this year? Is it going to kind of be more of a random draw? How are you guys going to kind of slot the teams into their groups?
So the first game of the day, it's all random draw. Just we'll pick out of a hat, and that after your first game, then you're slotted by whatever our tiebreaker is. So if I should know this, but it's either run differential or runs allowed, and that will slot you. So if you lose 1-0 to a good team, you're going to be rewarded for, just letting up one run and keeping it close. Whereas if you beat a team or you lose 15-0, you're going to be, seated, more towards the lower end. So that's where the second and third games happen.
Gotcha. Okay.
So yeah, it really is. That first game will help identify, okay, well, this team will slot here, that team will slot there.
Okay. That's awesome. The Masters has Augusta. College World Series has Omaha. Do you think that the National Championship is going to stay in New York, or do you see a future where it rotates to other sites around the country?
I think we'd love to run different areas across the country. One of the things that we know from all of our efforts in the past, the Northeast is where 90% of the wiffle ballers are at. The Wiffle corporations in Shelton, Connecticut. You can walk into, most stores in the summer anywhere in the New England area and get a yellow bat and a ball. Whereas, in other places in the country, maybe in the spring, but it's not out there all the time. The national tournament's been run in Texas a bunch, Austin in particular, and there's a really nice venue down there. We're looking at, different places for 2021. A lot of it also just depends on, what happens with, the major professional sports too, because, we've got some other different options. But I think, at least for the near term, it'll probably stay up in the Northeast. And with the only caveat being, it'll probably be a couple weeks earlier next year, just so we don't hit, the really cold weather. I think we'll be good for York, but it could be cold. But it's honestly some of the best baseball that's ever been played has been played at the end of October, in below freezing temperatures. So.
Yeah, and I tell you, as somebody who's on a team who's probably be closer to that number 40 than that number 1 in the seeding, any weather advantage that I can get that's going to help our team, that kind of an equalizer, we're gonna need. What type of media coverage is the tournament getting kind of outside the wiffle ball universe? I know there's a lot of podcasts, a lot of shows that cover wiffle ball that are kind of wiffle ball centric. Have you guys gotten a lot of media coverage outside of kind of the general wiffle ball universe?
So we have, we thought we were going to get a ton more when it looked like baseball wasn't going to come back. I'll give you guys an exclusive. I mean, this will be announced next week, but T-Mobile is sponsoring our event this year.
Awesome.
So they'll be sponsoring the Friday Night Fan Fest, where we'll have the Home Run Derby, and then both days on Saturday and Sunday. In terms of media, it really is about when we get to the day. That Thursday, that Friday, really, driving in to get folks. We know Dan Connolly, who used to write for the Sun and now writes for the Athletic. He lives in York. Unless the O's are in the World Series, I'm going to do everything I can to get him out there. If the O's somehow are in the World Series, I may not be in York. So.
That is a sacrifice I'm willing to make to if the Orioles are in the World Series.
But yeah, yeah, me too. The thing that we've seen over the years is the media will come, once we get a lot closer to the event. All I can say is the York Revolution have been a tremendous partner, and we know that this is the beginning of a long-term relationship, even if it's not with the national championship being in the stadium each year. There's going to be some type of big scale wiffle ball event up in York, for at least the next couple years.
That's awesome. Last question. If people want to find out more about United Wiffle, the tournament's obviously closed as far as registration goes, but if they want to find out more about United Wiffleball, how can they find out? And will any part of the tournament be live streamed anywhere?
Okay, so to find out more information, unitedwiffle.com, also unitedwiffleball.com. Both domains go to the same place. We're currently putting up team previews. I think we're about 25 of about 40 teams in. If you want to see like the variety of teams, some of the previews really give. Most of them have actual graphics with the players who played, so you could put a name to the face. And if they've played already, my brother who helps run this with me, he's the Wiffle historian aficionado. So if they've done something, if they've accomplished something in their career, it'll be on that site. What was the
whether or not any of the tournament's going to wind up being streamed, like the championship or anything like that?
So yeah, so other than probably the early morning games, Saturday morning, everything will be taped at the very least, and most likely from 3:00 on Saturday all the way through to the championship game will be accessible on some stream. What we're doing in terms of streaming is when you get so many people together with using different hotspots and stuff, we want to make sure that on the field we're delivering the best quality stream possible, because we want the people at home to be able to easily follow what's going on, not be interrupted by a dropped feed. So like early on, we're asking teams who have their own Facebook pages to stream their games, maybe their first round games, and we'll put that out on social media. Hey, watch, Old Line will be playing the Phenoms at 9:15. They'll be streamed on the Phenoms Facebook page. And then once we get later in the day, everything will be streamed. We've got access to Ethernet, and our main field is going to be hitting into the stands behind home plate. So we'll be able to actually be fully wired up for a professional level broadcast that we just haven't been able to. We've come close in MAW, but having the Ethernet, having the different abilities to capture the footage and bring it in and produce it on the fly. None of us are TV producers or anything, so you'll be able to see 80% of the games live streamed both days.
That's awesome. Tim Cooke, director, Mid Atlantic Wiffleball, United Wiffleball. Thanks so much for joining us, and thanks for putting this tournament on. This is the tournament. This is the event I didn't even know I was participating in 6 months ago, and I'm really looking forward to it and meeting you guys in person and getting on the field.
Yep. Thank you for having me on. And yes, United Wiffle is nothing if we don't have the players, and the players are the most important part of this. And we are very, very grateful to every single person who signed up for this tournament.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, Tim. Looking forward to it.
Thank you.
Many thanks to Tim Cooke for joining us on this week's episode of the Duckpin Podcast. As a player in the tournament, I am really looking forward to participating in this year's United Wiffle National Championship tournament. I'm really excited, even if I've never played competitive wiffle ball before. We're looking to have a good time up there with our Old Line Wiffle Club team. as we play in our first ever competitive wiffle ball. Please be sure to subscribe to this show, the Duckpin Podcast on YouTube. We're also all over your favorite podcatcher, Apple, Google, Spotify, Stitcher. We're all over. Just search the Duckpin Podcast in your favorite podcatcher. Of course, the duckpin.com is the home for all things Duckpin. We appreciate you going to that site and reading all the great things that our Duckpin writers are writing over at theduckpin.com. We are, of course, on social media. We are on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at the Duckpin. Please buy a t-shirt or some other swag from our Teespring store. You see the address there at the bottom of the screen, and please support the Duckpin in that way. And of course, you can contact us at any time, theduckpin@gmail.com. Let us know what you think of the show. Let us know if you have any guest suggestions, anybody you think I should interview for a future episode of the Duckpin Podcast. For everybody here at the Duckpin, thank you very much for joining me on this week's episode of the Duckpin Podcast. I am Brian Griffiths. Good night and God bless.
This has been the Duckpin Podcast. Don't forget to subscribe and download